All right, welcome back to the Solution Club. We are, after a break there, we're back into this very central conversation about the strategy, the next steps, what does the timeline look like and all that. So just to review that once again, very first next step is get this messaging about the conversation down, get it tight, right? Because that's really the genesis. And again, not everybody's going to agree on everything, but at least let's get together and have the conversation. And then from there, step number 2 after that is map out the topics that are Brooklyn specific, that are specific to the Brooklyn singularity. And I would add that for the Brooklyn singularity, the reason I came up with a separate name, separate from Brooklyn Eats, is that Brooklyn Eats is all about food, but the Brooklyn singularity goes way beyond food. It's about healthcare, it's about housing, it's about community, it's about parks and recreation, it's about education, it's about law enforcement, it's about government, it's about fire protection, emergency services, it's about the whole shebang, right? That's the Brooklyn singularity. Because in very simple terms, Brooklyn is going to transform itself, right? With a lot of help from a lot of people, and it's going to create a new model of what's possible. Right? And it answers the question, do we all have to go on being miserable? And the answer is no. We can create a new way that's super cool, super fun, super enriching, per the much earlier conversation at the beginning of today on a previous recording about precisely the conversation. It can be super meaningful. Super fun. I mean, my goodness, I think it'll be a night and day difference between this crazy game that we were born into, that we do not have to keep perpetuating. This game of hoarding, this game of capitalism, this game of destroying Mother Earth for this intangible thing called a dollar, right? Money, right? And all of us agreeing to play this game around money. It's what's been killing us. So I think a whole new game is possible, a whole new, path for humanity, a whole new mission, whole new meaning, whole new purpose. I think we can begin to co-create that in Brooklyn and let it be an ongoing evolution, an ongoing answer and evolution of an answer to the question, how should we walk the earth, right? Who are we? Why are we here? What's our purpose? What's our mission? What's the game, right? Of all the things we could be doing, what shall we choose to do, right? Anyway, that's all within the conversation. So starting with that conversation, we then go to all the topics that are Brooklyn-centric, specific to the Brooklyn singularity, not just Brooklyn Eats, right? That for me is step number 2. Go ahead.
Really quickly, I just want to run down the, just so I'm clear before you go forward, that the first step is to create the community of communities of Brooklynites and the initiatives that are already there and bring them to the conversation, so that we can create the collective intelligence that's going to take us forward to how do we do this with regard to Brooklyn Eats. But step 2 after that is the Brooklyn singularity, which is where we go beyond the food, where we have specific conversations about Brooklyn, which is the housing, education, law enforcement, government, emergency services, parks and rec, healthcare, is where we have those more in-depth conversations that are broader than the Brooklyn Eats initiative. Did I understand that right?
Let's see. I have a little bit of a different view, but here's the thing. We're just kind of co-creating this in conversation, so it's all good. let's just keep at it until we've got something we really like, right? I would say step one is really about the broader conversation. Step one, the broader conversation. How do we save life on Earth? What do we want? What's the goal? What's the strategy, etc.? And now, within that broader conversation, it's included steps 1, 2, and 3. So step 1 within the broader conversation is the broader conversation. Step 2 within the broader conversation, I would propose, would be creating a whole list of separate conversations to have that are Brooklyn specific. But it's mainly about Brooklyn Eats, I would say, but it's just not limited to that. It's mainly about that, but not limited to that. And that's why I talk about the Brooklyn singularity, because this isn't just about feeding people, right? It's about bringing community together. It's about redefining community. And I would actually go so far as to say that in the process of doing the Brooklyn singularity, right, we will go pretty far along the path of evolution of redefining humanity and our purpose here and who we are as caretakers of each other, caretakers of Mother Earth. And so I see the Brooklyn singularity as just the beginning of just this planetary revolution, not a violent revolution, but a revolution of just transforming our local environment and the game, and fundamentally the game that we're playing, and answering the question, who are we, why are we here? Anyway, that's all step 2, is just start the kind of the starter kit for that, that starter kit of conversations for the Brooklyn singularity. So imagine some electrician who's like 75 years old and has this huge garage with all these electrical components and gadgets and testers and this and that and all kinds of stuff. Just master electrician. Well, 70 years earlier, when he was 5 years old, he got his first Radio Shack starter electronics kit, right? That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the $5 Radio Shack starter kit, just to get the conversation started around the Brooklyn singularity, mainly around Brooklyn Eats, I would say, right? And it's really in that process that we build this network of conversations from amongst this community of communities. Some communities in Brooklyn, other communities outside of Brooklyn that are here to support Brooklyn, right? So step 2 is really Brooklyn centric. Step 1 is the big conversation, promoting that, getting that clear. Step 2 is the Brooklyn conversation, the Brooklyn conversations, plural. So step 1 is the conversation. Step 2 is the Brooklyn conversations, plural. And step 3, I would say, is everything else leading up to the press conference, but not beyond. The press conference and initial media event, including all the initial food deliveries and all that, right? Hey, Myra, welcome back, sister. How you doing?
Hey everybody, I'm doing good. I was here earlier and I was listening to the conversation, but I had to log out for another meeting and then I came back again.
Sure, very good. Super glad you're back. Yeah, we're having some awesome conversations here. So
nice. What is the conversation about right now?
Okay, so this is a perfect time to recap. So I'm going to tell you about 2 different conversations, one of which is called The Conversation, and that's a big conversation that I'll talk about in a second. And the second is the Brooklyn Conversations, plural, So it's a group of conversations, the Brooklyn conversations. The conversation is about, fundamentally, it's about how do we save life on Earth? How do we get out of this death spiral that we're in the midst of right now and onto a path towards safety and ultimately utopia, right? How do we do that? And that is the conversation. And I suggest a way of breaking that conversation, the conversation, down into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3, right? 1 is, what are our goals? What do we want to achieve? Where is utopia? What does it look like? What are we all doing there, right? What's the game? If the game in our present world up until this moment has been a game of hoarding, what's the game in the game of utopia? Is it sharing, right? Caring? It's a different game. So that's a conversation within the conversation is, what's our goal or our goals, right? And that, that's kind of our true north. You need to know where you're going, right? In fact, there's I think it was from Alice in Wonderland, but it was Sinclair Lewis who wrote, if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know what your destination is, any path will take you there, right? And that's the story of planet Earth in the last 10,000 years. We haven't known what our destination is, so just this random chaotic path has taken us here. Not a very pretty place. And here we are. All right. So we need to know our destination so that we can then figure out the path or a path to get us there. Right. And that's the second conversation within the conversation, is the conversation about the path or the strategy. What's the strategy to get us from where we are to where we want to get to? So we start with the goal, then we talk about the strategy that connects us from where we are now to the goal, to where we want to be. And that's a whole conversation. And then the third part, the third conversation within the conversation, is a conversation about our very, very immediate, very next steps. What do we do right now? 1, 2, 3. What's our very next step? What's the next step after that? And what's the next step after that? Right? So that's what I call the conversation, right? The Brooklyn conversation, it's because, see, the conversation is about the planet. It's about the whole of Mother Earth, right? It's about saving life on Earth, as much of life as we can possibly save, even in the midst of the current 6th mass extinction. How do we slam the brakes on the current 6th mass extinction? How do we cool the planet? And how do we transform humanity so that we set ourselves on a whole new course? Myra, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, well, I have been on a few interesting conversations or meetings this morning. And I was watching also the governor of here, Arizona, have a speech as of now. And for instance, within my own views, I do definitely believe that 2 of the biggest problems that humanity needs to alleviate is definitely global warming and hunger. So with hunger, that comes the whole topic of the re-education, that is not only about hunger, but it's about giving food of quality, food that is plant-based. Because this is the only way that we can avoid another pandemic. And if we do get another pandemic, for whatever reasons, we have our immune system ready for that. The governor from here, from Arizona, he obviously, I mean, basically a lot of stuff, it's opened as of now. A lot of my friends are back to work, but they're in fear. They're in fear. A lot of the employees, they have decided not to go because they have immune compromised family members, and they don't want to expose them. My sister-in-law, she was exposed to someone that is positive, and her employer told her that they cannot afford to pay her 2 weeks of quarantine, that they cannot even pay her to have everybody tested at the company. So now my sister-in-law is freaking out because now my nephew, my twins, nieces, they get sick in a constant basis. They usually have what we call it upper respiratory infections. And they have it very constant, but because they still eat lactose and they have their own views, but I guess it doesn't matter right now. What matters is the fact that a lot of people, we're most likely going to get a very bad wave of COVID, and even a stronger, maybe even a stronger strain, because it keeps on mutating. It keeps on getting stronger. It frightens me that we're going to see more people getting infected, and a lot of people might get diseased over this situation. One of the conversations that I had this morning, which I hate to be in conflict with, I don't like to be in conflict with nobody, but since I've been a child, I am the type of person that doesn't stay quiet. And I always fight for injustices, and if there's something that I just don't agree with, I'll talk it over in good manners. So there was a conversation that got my attention because it was about the importance about money, and how in the Piscean age, how we were so attached to the compassionate ways, but I don't see it like that. For me, it's more like, no, people were so attached to the material, to being materialistic. And we have to rip that off. This is the Aquarian age. And for me, the Aquarian age is more of the equality, more of duality, more love, more compassion, more understanding. And I got a little bit into conflict with that because they told me that I need to get out of the Piscean age and jump into the Aquarian age, which I thought it was funny because money is going to lose value pretty soon. And life is teaching us how to help each other out. I was thinking just a little bit before I got here, we know that SRM was or is still one of the most important things that should be already getting built and getting installed. Getting the funding most important. But I'm like, okay, so why can't we tell people that at least in the meanwhile, start painting your rooftops in white color? I mean, we have to find ways where we know that if we cannot find funding for the SRM, we can work little by little and at least spread the message of what can help us with global warming and stuff. Now, like, what is in our hands to do? SRM is not in my hands to do. I don't have the money for that. I don't know how to install it. I don't know where to put it. But I can afford a bucket of paint. And I can, probably not where I live, but I'm pretty sure like in Mexico, in Central and South America, they're not very strict like the communities. And they can definitely go out there and start painting their roofs in white. And the reason that I was so concerned about this is because that I saw in Monterrey, Mexico, how all of a sudden they're getting some abrupt climate change. They're getting a lot of, this week they reported, I don't know how many tornadoes. And that's something that they haven't seen. They started seeing it last year and we barely started summer. So we are going to start seeing more of this. It's scary, it is, but I feel like we have to spread the message of what's in our hands to do as of now. Wanted to share that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Myra. Wow, really good stuff. You know, that actually gets to the heart of what we're now calling the conversation. Because here's the thing. It's definitely true. There's a bunch of small things that we can do on a local scale, from creating a backyard garden to painting our roof white to lots of things we can do, right? Doing yoga, all kinds of stuff. That's all very, very good. What's missing from this entire set of projects that are happening here, there, and everywhere, what's missing, there's one huge thing missing, and we're calling it the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is that what's missing is what we're calling the conversation. The big conversation about how do we save life on Earth. And I would say at the heart of that conversation, well, I was about to say at the heart is strategy, but there's actually a lot of things at the heart of that conversation. But one of the things at the heart of it is strategy, right? How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And how do we do it now? You know, about like all those things they talk about in the 80s and the 90s and and they never happened, right? How do we make this not one of those things that is talked about but never happens, okay? And so we actually designed the conversation to address each and every one of those concerns. So the conversation about how to save life on Earth starts with a goal. Where do we want to get to, right? Rather than just say, oh, let's save life. Okay, maybe we save life this month, but then what happens next month, right? So is our goal just to save it for one more month, one more year, one more decade? What is our goal? How far ahead are we looking? Where do we want to get to? And we don't have to spend a lot of time on that conversation because we've got a lot of urgent things to actually do other than talk about the future. But we do need to have at least some notion of a true north. It could be a 5-minute conversation, but I'd rather spend 5 minutes and have that conversation than never have the conversation. And that's what's happened up until now. We've never had the conversation before. Okay? All right. So again, the conversation is broken into 3 parts. The goal, the strategy, that's one of the hearts of it. And what do we do right now? Step 1, 2, 3. Because step number 1 is either I stop everything, end this meeting, and go paint my roof white, or step number 1 is we perfect this communication about the conversation, or step number 1 is something else. But, I can't be 10 places at once. There's one step number 1, right? To affect the strategy to get to the goal. Now, the strategy itself may have multiple parts, right? It may not just be one single monolithic strategy. It may have a bunch of different parts. That's fine. Let it have as many parts as it wants. But there is one strategy, there is one story overall that if we're going to make it, it's because we did this, right? It won't be because we didn't do that and instead just did the millions of things that we're doing on a small local scale as we all continue down the death spiral. So something's definitely not working here. So what I'm suggesting is missing is the conversation. How to save life on Earth, what's the goal, what's the strategy, and where do we start? So looking at it at that planetary scale, that's what I'm saying has never been done before. Or if it's been done, it hasn't been effective. So we think we've got a shot at doing it effectively. Earlier, we talked about the goal. In fact, it might help to should we rewatch that 8-minute video on the conversation that I recorded last night? Would that help to kind of get us all on a common place? Or, because I don't think Myra or Akshay have seen it. And Natalie, were you on when we watched it earlier? James says yes. Yeah, why don't we do it? Shall we do it? All right, let's do it. That way we all get on the same page. Oh, but even before that, I wanted to read what Natalie had written earlier. A little while back, Natalie wrote, "When you see a chicken nicely packaged in a shiny wrapper, you are far removed from the origins of it. So when you've never been homeless, starving, and always had money to keep the lights on, they have no sense of struggle or empty for them that face these, I think empathy, that face these issues on a daily basis. Unless they are willing to step out of a world of golden taps and high-class food, I don't think a lot of them will ever understand. We are the few, the 5% of oddballs, strugglers, and empathic hearts. That's why we are here. As Charlie Chapman says, they think too much and feel too little. Very well said, Natalie. Thank you for that. All right. If anyone has anything to add to that while I get the next video. The conversation.
Before you jump into that video, there was a saying from someone in a meeting today that I found it also very interesting that said, you help humanity more by not hand giving them a piece of bread, but by showing them how to cook the bread. And I think it is definitely, with no doubt, very important that when it comes to alleviate world hunger, that we do teach people how to cook in a plant-based ways. They have no clue. All they know for years is how to put a piece of meat in the grill and how to do just the basic, like a normal salad or guacamole or whatever. They don't know that we can make a perfect, delicious meal in a plant-based way. So that is another thing that we have to definitely put it out there. There's plenty of that information on YouTube, like if people go in there, but there is still a lot of people that are very not into technology. So we just have to understand that there is a lot of third world countries still, and they don't know how to get to that information. So
yeah, well, I think with the conversation, and by the way, since we're starting with VCI in 25 minutes, and I looked at the video is actually closer to 12 minutes long. Let's hold off on playing the video and just talk this through, because you've raised some good stuff there, Myra. So as regards teaching people, showing people, inspiring people to not only grow their own food but eat the right food, there's two things that that we've been talking about specifically for Brooklyn. Let's just take Brooklyn as an example, okay? So first of all, there's delivering plant-based food to everyone, right? I mean, the quickest, easiest, most powerful way to get somebody to wake up to the wonders of plant-based food is to give them a delicious plant-based meal. Delicious, nutritious, and say, here, see what you've been missing. And the fact that you're giving it to them, right? Look, we eat all the time. We eat here, there, yeah, da, da, da. Whenever a neighbor comes over and says, here, I have a gift of food, whoa, suddenly it gets my attention, right? That's not just the everyday bread, el pan de cada día. It's something special because it was gifted to me. So I'm gonna really pay more attention to it, right? It's kind of obvious. Okay, so that's one way. The other way is helping people grow their own food. So in Brooklyn, what we're talking about is, I mean, people have already organized around community gardens and to some degree community permaculture. We're talking about taking that to a whole new level, okay? In community spaces, in open spaces. But then also for inside people's private homes, inside their apartments, right? How do they grow food there? So just like if you have a problem with your toilet, instead of, trying to fix it yourself, you call the plumber, right? Well, likewise, if you need permaculture in your apartment, and everybody needs to grow their own food, not all of it, but as much as they can. Imagine we had whole teams of young people, properly trained, properly sanitized, protected, tested, you name it, everything, full on, okay? This team of young folks goes around installing permaculture systems inside people's apartments in Brooklyn. And teaching them how to use it and saying, look, here's the YouTube videos to watch. Here's, here's who to call if you have any questions, need something repaired, maintained, whatever, and do it as a community service, right? So it's not just teaching them how to do it, putting up a bunch of YouTube videos, showing and hoping that somebody watches them, but actually taking it right to their door, taking the food right to their door. Boom, we're here to feed you. Eat up, right? And then helping them grow their own food, both in their own home and at the community level with community gardens, etc. And where we cannot grow enough food, like in Brooklyn, it's pretty densely populated, a lot of concrete, a lot of asphalt, not a lot of bare soil hanging around waiting for somebody to plant, right? That's Brooklyn for you, right? So the reality is we're going to need to bring in some grains, some rice, probably some beans, some corn, some wheat, etc. So be it, right? And that's one of the crucial things is rather than leaving it up to everyone to fend for themselves and just trying to teach them and hoping they have the resources to fend for themselves, because not everybody does, it's guaranteeing that everybody eats. As a collective communal community action, right? And that is at the heart of the strategy to get us from where we are to where we want to go, where we want to get to. At least it's the initial heart of the strategy. Feed everybody, right? Feed everyone and build this community of communities, both to support the feeding of everyone and in its own right as a collective intelligence, collective community, a planetary community that is looking out for everyone and everything, all of our brother and sister species and ecosystems. That's the heart of the strategy. It's collective superintelligence meets feed the world whole food plant-based diets and help them grow their own food, but in any case, guarantee everyone eats, period. No more letting little girls starve and become emaciated and drop dead. For that, those days are over. Again, collective superintelligence meets feed everyone, whole food plant-based immune boosting, right? Meets SRM. Those are the big three for getting started. Those are the big three. We need to get smart, we need to get fed, and getting fed in the right way gets us off pandemics, and we need to get cool. We need to cool it. We need to get smart, we need to get fed, we need to get cool. Here, let me oh, my sunglasses aren't here, otherwise I'd put them on, but I'll just pretend I'm putting them on. We need to get smart, we need to get fed, we need to get cool. We need to get smart, we need to get fed, get cool. That's it, that's the strategy. That's what I propose. Now, do you have a different strategy? What do you got? But let's have the conversation where we talk about what's the goal that we want to get to. Hey, there are some people who are saying, abrupt climate change, bring it on. Let's get rid of all the people. I don't agree with that, but I guess they have the right to their opinion. But anyway, so they've got a whole different goal in mind than what we do. What I'm suggesting is the vast majority of us want to live, and we want our children to live, and we want humanity to continue. But in a good way, not in the terrible way that we've been living, right? As a whole, right? And it's not okay anymore to say, well, I'm doing my part. So no. This is about getting the whole family together, the whole human family, right? So is getting back in the room from London. Welcome back, So. Great to have you back. She's just connecting to her audio. So, hey, just so everyone knows, in 18 minutes, this meeting will shift gears abruptly and become the Vegan Collective Intelligence meeting in 18 minutes at 5 o'clock Pacific time. So the last 2 hours of the Solution Club is Vegan Collective Intelligence from now on. And this is an example of a merger of communities, a community of communities, right? Bringing communities together. So it's a beautiful thing. And of course, we've got lots of overlap on the Block Party Anyway, so it's all good. How you doing there? So welcome back. We are recording, and we're back into the conversation. And because the thing is, and this gets back to the earlier questions, what should we be doing now? Should I be painting my roof white, or should I be as the very next step, right? What is the next step? The very next step. And what's the step after that? And what's the step after that? That's the third pillar of the conversation. Again, the conversation, the goal, the strategy, and 1, 2, 3, immediate next steps. It breaks it down really simple. Long-term, immediate, and the connecting rod between the two. The conduit between the two, the pathway from where we are now in our immediate next steps to where we want to get to long-term. It simply breaks the whole journey into 3 parts: the end, the beginning, and the middle. I mean, it's kind of that simple. Beginning, middle, end, right? So it's actually having the conversation and saying, okay, in addition to all these millions of little projects and big projects happening here, there, and everywhere, there is the conversation, and that's missing, and it needs to happen. And everyone needs to get into it to the extent that they're able and willing. But those of us who are awake and get it have a certain responsibility, what the French would call noblesse oblige, right? The obligation conferred by nobility, right? And getting it in this day and age of mass delusion is a real luxury. It's a real blessing, and we need to take that blessing and run with it. We need to take that blessing and we need to run with it all the way to the conversation and have the conversation and participate, therefore, in the leading of humanity into the conversation and through the conversation and to the other side. And the other side is some form of collective consensus about what we need to do, including right now, 1, 2, 3, chop, 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 including the whole strategy trajectory all the way to the end goal. We need to reach consensus on all that. If we don't, what do we got? We're all just scrambling around doing our thing. All right, what does consensus look like? What does it look like to reach consensus? That we all agree? No, we're not. We're never all going to agree on anything, right? So, and here's where I want to frame it in the following terms, and this gets to what I promised to talk about an hour and a half ago, and we're getting to now, but that's fine. It's all perfect timing. Is that imagine that in the process of having the conversation, okay, with its beginning, middle, and end, imagine that, just like Hollywood movies, you don't even have to like movies to acknowledge that there's, at any given time, there's a #1 blockbuster movie, that's #1 at the box office, a #2, and a #3, right? Okay. The answers to the question, how do we save life on Earth? In other words, the answers to the conversation, the conclusions of the conversation, right? Think of them like movies. There will be a #1 blockbuster that's really popular, a #2 that's right behind it, a #3 that's right behind it, all the way down to a number, 1253 that no one's ever heard of. And for good reason, because it's stupid, right? But it could be that right behind that is number 1254, which is brilliant. It's just that nobody understands it except for the few people who came up with it, right? And here's my point. My point is, let a gazillion flowers bloom. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, as the Chinese saying goes, right? Let all these different strategies, all these different complete whole answers to the question, how do we save life on Earth? Let a bunch emerge. Let them compete, for lack of a better word. Because in the end, we'll probably go with a number of them anyway, right? And amidst all this, for lack of a better word, competition, I don't really think of it as a competitive thing. We're more just creating new tools, new solutions, new answers. But among them will be the Brooklyn singularity, right? The 1, 2, 3, the strategy, and the endpoint, all encapsulated within this concept of the Brooklyn singularity. which is all about starting with Brooklyn, feeding everyone there, whole food, plant-based, immune-boosting diets, and announcing that to the world at the very beginning of it, when we're on the very day that we start doing the food deliveries. We do a press conference that morning, right? Get the world's attention. And that press conference becomes the singularity within the singularity, right? That becomes the moment when the world is put on notice that there is a solution. In other words, that is Babe Ruth grabbing the baseball bat and swinging with all his might and hitting a home run, a grand slam home run that wins the World Series. This is us giving it our best shot to forward our answer to the conversation, which is the Brooklyn singularity, right? I mean, in my mind, I've been running through the conversation in one form or another all my life. And at the ripe young age of 52, with a pot belly, I have an answer. It's called the Brooklyn singular. I didn't come up with it. We all came up with it together. Jackie came up with it more than I did, but here it is, right? And now I feel like this is what I'm focused on. And this gets back to the we, right? Because what I'm not saying is, hey, because I'm focused on this, I think everyone should focus on this. No. With the growing network of conversations, each individual can focus on whatever they want to focus on. If they want to focus on solution number 1253 that Jamin Shively thinks is stupid, and that most people agree with Jamin is stupid, if they want to focus, go for it, right? So I've really become a big believer in just letting 1,000 flowers bloom, and out of them, one of them will bloom taller than the rest. One of them will be the number one blockbuster. Does that mean it's necessarily the best? No, it's simply the one that became the most popular, right? But we're also at a moment now where we kind of don't have forever to debate about this, right? We need to drive towards consensus, right? And that's another reason I like this idea of letting 1,000 flowers bloom and let the most popular emerge, and whatever, you know. And if it's supported by a number 2, a number 3, and a number 4, great. We've got 4 horses in the race. Great, let's go, right?
When are you planning the press conference, Jamin?
We were talking about that earlier. So remember how in the conversation there's 3 parts: goal, strategy, and first 3 steps? So the first 3 steps that make sense to me are: step number 1, get this present conversation about the bigger conversation, which is planetary, not just little Brooklyn, but the whole world, right? So step number 1 for me is get this conversation about the conversation, get it down, right? Get it tight and start spreading it around and say, hello, brother, sister, it's time for the conversation. We need you here. It's not okay that you're not in the conversation. The house is on fire and you're playing video games up on the 3rd floor. No. We need you here in the conversation.
What happened with the other questions that were written for the purpose of the press conference last week?
Yeah, so those are sitting there. I emailed them all out last week. But here's where we're at is I believe that we're not ready to actually continue writing the press conference. I think we're at a different stage of focus. So when I say step number 1, that we get this conversation down, I literally mean that. I literally mean the first step that I want to focus on. Instead of painting my roof white, I actually want to focus on getting the conversation down. That's a step, right? It's real work. We're doing it right now. We are doing step 1 as we speak, okay? Step 2 for me, Myra, is developing a network of conversations, from this one starter conversation to a whole network of conversations that is Brooklyn centric, that is fundamentally about Brooklyn Eats. Okay? For me, that's step 2. Develop this network of conversations, and that means develop the topics. What do we want to talk about? Right? Brooklyn churches, religions, mosques, great, let's talk about that. Brooklyn community gardens, let's talk about that. Brooklyn food banks, let's talk about that. Brooklyn, communal dining for everyone. That what exists now, basically. What's Brooklyn currently doing? Right? Let's bring in all of those. Let's create topics that will hold all of those, and then invite all of those specific communities that are working on those current projects. Let's invite them to the right topics. But we first need to write up a list of those right topics. That's step number 2. Come up with the list of topics. And then step number 3, and first of all, I just want to note that step number 2 actually takes us quite a long ways, because once we have the right breakdown of topics, and we got the Friday block party going on, the Brooklynites are going to be all over that block party, right? They're going to be all over it. Brooklyn invented the block party, for crying out loud, so they're going to love it. So we got block party, we got Solution Club, right? We get it all chunked out, and we invite all these communities. They're all going to say, hey, you're not even in Brooklyn. What you doing here? And we're like, hey, blah, blah, blah. Well, this is who we are, and this is what we're working on, and this is what, oh, got it, cool. And so through step 2, that will build a community of communities focused on feeding Brooklyn, focused on the Brooklyn singularity. So there's Brooklyn Eats, that's at the heart of the Brooklyn singularity, but the Brooklyn singularity includes other stuff beyond just eating, right? So that's step 2, build out the community of communities through a network of conversations, right? And then step 3 that I propose is, once that community of communities is built out and thriving, that it then focus on everything else that needs to happen leading up to the press conference. So we're actually not ready for the press conference conversation as far as I'm concerned, because we haven't built the community of communities yet. Look, here I am, this non-Brooklynite, right, playing this huge leading role. Something's missing here. Now, Jackie's from New York, but she's from Manhattan. She's not from Brooklyn. She's from Manhattan. Get out of here. Here we are with Operation Brooklyn, and there's not a Brooklynite amongst us. That's a problem. Okay? So I ain't ready to draft no press conference for no Brooklyn if they ain't even know Brooklynites in the house. I'll shake my head till it falls off if I have to, but that ain't happening. So let's get some Brooklynites in the house. Let's build out the community. Okay, so speaking of community communities, in 4 minutes, we're starting VCI. Why don't we just give ourselves a little compassionate breather? I'll stop recording. And
just
yeah, Jake.
like, in just what you had to say there, no, I'm exactly. There's no time that we have to get this underway and everything else. So for my part, from this conversation and from taken from last week's conversation where we left off on this subject, I did what we were talking about when we were saying, when we were on about the idea of getting Irish communities involved and trying to get them to send over something like a token donation or whatever, irregardless, the community of communities. So as I said, I started the Facebook page. It's not published. If anybody wants me to send them an invite to it, friend me on Facebook and I'll send them an invite to it. I would like a people's opinion on the description of the group, just so that so that everyone's comfortable with it, and it's basically just an idea based on charitable organizations and environmental organizations to get communities, local, national and international, together, because it's now time that, as I said, given the circumstances we're in today, we find that when all else fails, it's only community that comes together to help each other. And there's perfect examples of that all over New York and everywhere else at the moment. So it's a perfect opportunity to set up a community of communities Facebook post. It's like a sharing post page for advertising, charitable organisations, events, or even a place for a community to reach out if they're in need of some assistance. You know what I'm saying? So, and there's a few different areas in it then as well. So, if anyone wants me to send them the link, I'll send them the link. They can let me know what they think of it. But I do need your opinion as well, Jim, on whether it's okay to go ahead with the description with the block party and everything part of it, so that we can. So they can just get it going and see what way it goes. Because if we don't start something to get the community of communities together, it won't start. And as you said, and as Jackie said, not everybody's technology capable, but everybody's on Facebook. It's as simple as that. Everyone's on fucking Facebook. Whether they're technology capable or not, they're on it on their phone or whatever. They're on it 24/7, half of them. So if we get it right, if we get the page right, and start it, as I said, in the description, I said it. It's been launched as in the true spirit of the Irish compassion nature. It's been launched from Ireland, as a launch platform for the idea to get community of communities going. But then that is also our platform then as well for advertising the block party and getting people to the table to have the conversation.
Oh, sorry, I was just talking to the crows. It's time to feed the crows again. Anyway, hey, Jackie, can I make you co-host so you can let people in from the waiting room while I feed the crows? Okay. Whoa. All right. Let me do that while I get myself semi-organized here. No, James, I absolutely love it. In fact, what I'd love to do is here's just an out there proposal. I need some help in kind of mapping out the topics and all that. Jackie, Myra, and Melissa, the three of you have done a wonderful job with the Divine Feminine and starting to line up guests and whatnot. All right, looks like people are coming in for VCI. You're now co-host, Jackie. Myra, I'll make you co-host also. Okay, so as we see people come into the waiting room, we can any of the three of us can let them in. Just look down when participants lights up. Jessica, welcome. We're just wrapping up our previous segment, and so James, I just wanted to add. So basically, Jackie, Myra, and Melissa, if the three of you would like to help take on kind of mapping out the Brooklyn topics and times and all that, that would be awesome. Count on my full support. Call me whenever you need. And then that way, James, what I'd love for you to do is coordinate, with maybe just with Jackie on point, because she's from New York. Maybe coordinate with Jackie and say, look, I'd like to get a segment on there to talk about Ireland and the Irish community, and Ireland loves, right, Brooklyn Eats. I still kind of dig that name. Anyway, whatever name, it's your community. Ireland, this is your community, right?
Well, I've named the page Ireland Double Hearts Loves. That's what the page is just called, Ireland Loves. And every topic that it puts up then is kind of headed with Ireland Loves. So okay, that way we get to the idea of Ireland Loves, Brooklyn Eats. It will be the next one of them as well. As you said, it's a small part of a big wheel.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so let's roll with that, and then if you could coordinate with Jackie and schedule a time and a focus and an everything, and just get it down, we'll do it. And if you want to bring, Sir Bob from the Boomtown Rats or whoever as your guest, bring them, right? But really, I would, this way, we get to support you, James, in building the Ireland Loves community, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to go ahead and do this, and I don't want to publish it on Facebook either until I have everybody's input on it and everyone's happy with it. And I wouldn't be comfortable publishing it until I was sure it was right in every way anyway. So
Yeah,
yeah, anyone,
absolutely. Anyway, so let's follow up on that. Maybe you and I and Jackie can start an email thread going, and we get that all dialed in. And whoever else wants to be on it, just let us know if you want to be on the thread. Happy to add. You know, this is all about including everyone. But then where the real action happens is when we have that scheduled time slot on the block party, which could start this Friday, as far as I'm concerned. Let's work it out, right? Let's have those meetings and, you know, really get it all defined, right? All righty. Hey, Benjamin, Suzanne, welcome everybody. Benjamin and Suzanne, I'm going to make you guys co-hosts along with me and Jackie and Myra. Silas, how you doing? You're on mute. That's cool.
I have a quick question, Jim, and before
Yes.
you go feed the crows. Have anybody has done any research on the Spanish flu pandemic that we had 100 years ago, just to learn how was it contained, how people, how did they figure it out, things? Just wondering, like, if we have done any research on that, so we can learn from that and learn from not making the same mistakes, or even learn from some type of wisdom that they did.
I have a feeling Silas has an answer to that, since he's a student of everything relevant. Great to see you, Silas. We can kick off VCI whenever. Let's see.
I would just say a word of caution anyway to the co-hosts because of last week's incident. Make sure that you have the share screen button switched off.
Oh yeah, we've gotten that one taken care of. And welcome accounts team on Garai. Does anyone know accounts team on Garai? Well, you're certainly. Oh, looks like accounts team. Maybe they got into the wrong meeting. Anyway, anyways, Silas, I think you were waiting to answer Myra's question.
Yeah, I mean, I have read some, and basically at that time, I don't think they had a good way of analyzing. So they didn't have mathematical models and things like that, you know, so already done about this. So they were basically flying by the seat of their pants. And people did, in different places, did do different interventions. So in some places, they did do social isolation and minimizing, you know, interaction between people. And I think in other places, like in Philadelphia, they had influx of people from the war that made it worse because the Philadelphia was a port that had a lot of people coming in. So World War I, I think at that time was the big distributor. It allowed it to spread throughout the world. And as you know, it infected a lot of people. A lot of people died because of that. And so there again, the pandemic got worse after the first infection. Then in fall, it came back and it was much more virulent. And so that is the influenza virus that's still with us today. So we all built up some immunity to it, and eventually it became like a seasonal flu. And it also started with animals.
So it's with no doubt something that we are expecting also to happen here, which in July they are expecting the a more dangerous strain of this virus, and definitely more people infected.
We don't know. You know, not every virus behaves the same way. The SARS-1 virus actually became less lethal over time. And because, you know, viruses also don't want to kill people. They want to propagate themselves. So they do prefer a version of themselves that can linger, you know, in people without killing them. But this particular one seems to be impacting some of the key receptors in our blood vessels. So it is, I mean, it literally has a lot to eat when it comes into our body. So this is why it turns our lungs into jelly, pretty much, and makes it hard for people to breathe. So anyway, this is a distraction. So.
Yeah, no, but we've got definitely plenty on our plates. We've got more than our share to take on, and this is definitely the place to do it. So I'm going to stop the previous recording and start a new one whenever everyone's ready.